This is Maura, age 19. She is deaf-blind, multi-handicapped. She has been a resident at Fairview State Hospital since age 3. In October of 1977, she entered the Deaf-Blind Pre-Vocational Project. This project has been successful in training several other of the deaf-blind clients and placing them in the pre-vocational section of the sheltered workshop at the hospital. But Maura was different from the other deaf-blind clients. She was not an obvious choice for success.
The diagnosis was something called nuclear agenesis, probably because they didn't know what else to call it. It was the closest that the doctors in Children's Hospital could come to the problems of the child. And the prognosis, at the most, 4 years. They gave us no hope whatsoever. They never once assumed that she would be anything but a vegetable and expire. Except one doctor, Dr. Helen McGregor, who had her from birth. And she often said to me, and she is now deceased, she always said to me, I know there's a perfect brain in that little head. She even from birth, when she had her good days, she could see sparks of intelligence that no one else was ever able to see. And she fought very hard for her.
Maura's parents held on to the hope that there would be something better for her, some way to use the abilities that they felt she had. But the problem seemed overwhelming.
Well, as I recall, she always was, sort of stubborn. She always was feisty, more or less. I think that would be the real word for her. Always wanting attention. She will strip. She will urinate on the floor and throw her diapers at you, more or less. She always wanted attention, I know. She will push some of the clients on the floor if she wanted a space on the sofa for herself. She was a fragile-looking client, but it was surprising how much strength she had. She was that type of client. Never could figure out what she wanted, really. We assumed it was really bad behavior on her part.
Maura was a very frustrated young lady. She seemed to not know really what she wanted to do at different times. Take her clothes off at various times. She would throw wheelchairs. She would hit clients. Just seemed to be in a lot of frustration on her part.
Maura's parents knew about the behavior problems, but their view was a little different.
She was not the easiest client they had to handle. She really couldn't do any damage to another client. She might push them or shove them because she didn't see them too. Remember, she's walking and stumbling all over the place. But if they pushed her, she would push back. But she really couldn't do too much damage because she wasn't strong enough at that time. But she, many times, was damaged terribly because she would bump into other clients and they were stronger and they would knock her down, bite her. She would retaliate as best she could. This is not unusual with children, I don't think. But she was not as strong at all until after her last surgeries, especially after the ear surgery. Then she really began to develop, and this is when it was obvious that she could learn so many things, but there was no program for her.
The behavior problems, along with the lack of specific programming, brought Maura's progress almost to a standstill.
Was rather minimal on how she was progressing. She had some basic skills. She wasn't toilet trained. Wasn't following directions very well at the time. I felt that she did have potential. It was hard to really know just what she could do with it because we had not really seen that potential tapped.
We have great faith and confidence in Maura's abilities. We know her limitations. We don't know her capabilities, the extent of them. And she's learned to live with those limitations. Now we'd like to see the other side of the rainbow, and see just how far she can go. with what we feel she has.
Parental persistence paid off, and Maura was accepted into the deafblind pre-vocational program. However, there was apprehension on the part of the teaching staff.
What I learned from the level of care staff that worked directly with her, she was a very aggressive client. She attacked peers, staff, and had those incidents quite frequently during every day. She had not been programmed much due to her behavior. They had worked on it constantly on a one-to-one with her group leader and her, and it's been going on for years, and so they haven't really programmed her. I didn't think that she was appropriate, but her behavior was such that she was just very hard to handle and didn't seem like she would be attentive at all.
Well, at first, I felt that if she wouldn't sit, she didn't have much of a chance to progress in the project, because the project is one that you have to sit for a great length of time. You have to concentrate. You have to have a lot of attention towards what you're doing, and I really felt she didn't have the ability to do it.
Success for Maura, when we first started programming her, I felt that success would be just to have her attention on our specific project that we would be doing. Just to have any kind of attention span whatsoever would be a success for me.
Putting aside their concerns, the teaching staff began Maura's pre-vocational programming.
When I first began with her, I knew that the biggest task in front of me was to overcome her behavior. And so, to be honest with you, I was quite physical with her. I was very demanding of her. I would not let her, throw her tantrum and then, be passive and wait till it ended. I would just ignore her behavior and go ahead with whatever, just like it had never happened. And I would physically move her through the steps that we had to do. Soon she began realizing that I wasn't like the other people that she had worked with, and I wasn't going to give in. I was going to give it all I got. And she's a high enough functioning client to accept that. Our routine starts in the pre-vocational workshop by, first of all, transporting yourself independently to the workstation. There is a punch-in time card that they have to punch in before they work. Then they go get their work attire, which is an apron, and they put it on themselves, and they go in and sit in their work location, and they start work, and they have a time clock, and they receive tokens for a certain item completed, and then they get a break in the middle of the session, and they go back to work for the same period of time as the first session, and then they clock out, and they hang up their work attire, and they put away their activity, and they punch out and go home. Well, when we first started with Maura, our first goal was to have her sit in a chair. It was to sit in a chair just for any length of time, a few seconds, a couple minutes, and then it was to work on the attention span. We found it hard in the early stages of her development. We found it hard to find a good reinforcement for her. First of all, she didn't realize what a reinforcement was. And then, secondly, she just was a very picky type individual. Nothing really pleased her. We finally got along the lines of course, food. And she started liking pudding. And so at break time, when we had her in the office by herself, we had break time at the end of the activity, not in the middle, because it seemed like, we couldn't go for too long. And so she would purchase a pudding usually every day and then eat it and then go. When I first started programming her, I was wondering if I should just bring along a wheelchair and have her walk part of the way to the office and then wheel her the rest of the way, because she would just really throw tantrums because she couldn't walk that well, and when forced to, she didn't like it. And now I can take her anywhere at any time, and she'll just scoot right along at your pace.
Maura was beginning to show progress not only in the pre-vocational tasks, but in other areas as well.
We've always felt that she had a lot of capabilities. We always have felt, as my wife said, that the brain was there if there was any way of getting to it. The problems of speech and sight and hearing were tremendous obstacles to reach the brain. So we always felt that she could do that, but we had no idea how well she could do it. I think that since she's been going to school, she's walking so much better. I understand that, of course, we don't see her walking back and forth from school, but the personnel at the hospital say that she's walking all the way to school by herself. And if she lags behind, the teacher doesn't come back and help her a bit. He just continues on, and she raises her head and follows right after him until she gets a little mad sometimes, and then goes right on in until she gets all the way to school, and she walks all the way back, which is a tremendous achievement for Maura. That's a blind person and a deaf person and a halting person walking all the way to school and back. And then when she gets there, she does so very well. Actually, I think that just keeping her interested and stimulated, it changes her personality. I mean, boredom's gone, stagnation's gone. Everything is interesting.
Her behavior has changed just a great deal, and I think a lot of her behavior was probably her frustrations and not maybe being able to communicate. And that's her biggest change. Oh, she's able to follow directions much better now. Most of the group leaders have some very simple commands that they've learned from since she's been in the pre-vocational workshop and working with the Deaf Blind Project. She feels better within herself. Well, she must feel much better because she smiles more, she's happier, she's not taking her clothes off. Many of her behaviors are certainly diminished as to what they were before she started in this workshop. She was much more aggressive prior to this than she is now. She's not near as aggressive. I mean, you know, she was hitting clients and knocking over wheelchairs and those kind of things. She's much calmer in setting with her environment, with her other peers. I would say she seems more independent. She initiates some things on her own, which she did not do before. Going to the bathroom on her own, like if it's mealtime, getting up and going to the table rather than always having to be told, you know, to go to the table and things like that. She kind of sees the pattern of the day.
I thought the behavior will interfere with any kind of progress, but apparently being involved has diminished that behavior, and she's come along so much. She's altogether a different person. Just looking at her, the way she's carrying herself around, she seemed to have grown so much. She's not like an adolescent now. She's carrying herself more like a mature person. I have actually come down and watched Chris work with her right from the program office, which is quite a distance away, came down the road and actually went into her project area, watched her perform step by step, and no question, I mean, she wasn't getting too much cue either. She just went, put her apron on, and I thought, wow. She was bored because I presume that's why the behavior. But now that she has something that's really challenging, I think her behavior is diminishing.
The two most significant would be, of course, the behavior problems have diminished to a great extent. There are some problems occasionally, but it's so minute. And then, of course, to see her self-confidence arise has been very exciting. I think the biggest change I've seen in her is when she first started, there was a sternness about her, and her facial expression has softened so much. She smiles often and she laughs. I think it's exceptional. She has an attitude that she accepts people. And why I say this is because she was resistive to me at one time, and the other day I had played with her and she laughed and she responded to me, and I gave her a flower. And normally some of these children will just hold a flower and throw it away. And she was very interested, and she held it and she observed it. And I was very pleased at her reaction. Her ability to walk has improved so very much. At first it was very difficult for her to walk, and she has so far to walk from. And she walks. She seems to enjoy it. She now walks up and down stairs. She doesn't complain. In the beginning she did complain. She made some moaning sounds and groaning sounds, and she doesn't do that anymore. Well, she reminds me of a little lamb because she follows Chris. She does what he asks her to do, and she's very pleased to do it. And this is really astounding.
Well, walking, of course, is probably the most noticeable. But she no longer hits her head on windows, and she used to just bang her head all the time and cry a great deal. She makes sounds. She does vocalize, not well. She laughs much more. She's a much happier child. That's terribly important. She is happier. And I know that she is behaving better on the ward. Every time we go up there, they are very, you say, oh, she's doing so much better. She's so much happier. She's so much easier to handle. And so I think that she has overcome some of her frustrations. I think that was one of Maura's behavioral problems, that she was bored stiff. You know, she can't sit down and read a book or watch television, so she just sat there. So this is fantastic. It made her little mind work, and that's what she needs. To me, it's unbelievable, yeah. And I've seen her every week since the day she went in the hospital, unless I was ill. And the past 9 months, she has improved more than she has in 19 years. In this teaching situation, it's unbelievable. And it's very gratifying. And I wish Dr. McGregor were alive to see that her diagnosis of the fact there is a potential in this child is right. It's true. It's valid, you know. Because there she is doing things we never thought she'd do. I see her putting these things in the plastic bag. I crack up. It's so funny. I remember when she first started, she would not initiate picking up an item, and you'd have to prompt her very often. And now it's not like that. But, you know, in 9 months she's progressed so far, we really don't know how far she can go. And I certainly wouldn't want to put any limits on it. I think she has a lot more potential than I ever dreamed of. And I think that given the proper guidance, that she could do practically anything within certain limits. And what I mean by that is she could go into a sheltered workshop and she can function very well.
New challenges were offered to Maura, a change in work location, and the chance to work with other clients.
And we used to have her in our office, in the deafblind office, all by herself, so there would be no distractions. We were very concerned about her behavior. We wanted no distractions so that we can have her, maybe her attention span on the activity. Now she has moved over to the pre-vocational workshop that we have over in the Work Activity Center, and she is working with a group of kids, which is a very big step. Over in the workshop, she receives real money for her job. She gets 10 cents a day just being there, plus her tokens for the individual units that she does complete. And at break time, which is in the middle of the pre-vocation, she does go to the canteen independently. She does go to the counter independently, chooses what she does want, pays for it, goes and sits down and goes for it. And then afterwards, once she's done, she does clean up after herself and then go back to the workshop with the rest of the kids and continues working, which is quite a big step considering where we were at in the first 5 months. This improvement has been very rapid, as like I say, we've only been working with her 9 months, and this whole thing, when we started moving over to the with the rest of the kids over at the workshop setting over at the work activity center, this was only approximately, what, 4 months ago. And so all this is taking place within that time.
I think one of the prime things we have to worry about with her is that she does have receptive language. We have to worry about the expressive language.
Although Maura's expressive language is very limited, her ability to express herself in a gestural form has increased.
An example of that is Sunday was down there with her, and I can just make the hand sign, and I don't do very well because Chris didn't quite explain it to me. She gets right out of the car when I motioned to come. And we went up, she's on the 3rd floor of the hospital, we went up to her ward. I rang the bell, and the nurse didn't appear, so Maura took me by, she got behind me and she took me by the elbows, and she pushed me right back to the elevator, took my hand and put it on the button. The door opened, she pushed me in, she got in with me, put my hand on the button, and we went downstairs, we went outside, we walked around the building again, we came back in, went back up, she went back in the ward, and she stood there and she laughed. And the nurse said to me, "Gee, she's fantastic, she's so happy." And I said, "Yes, she's just taken me." Maura won. She wasn't ready to go back, so she just pushed me out. She knows exactly what all of those things mean. She did not know that before.
Well, just the fact that she is associating ideas now. She is, whether she can't see, she can't hear, but she can feel things. And after they're used for a while, she knows what they're for, and she remembers this. Before, nothing seemed to really matter to her. It wasn't. It could have been the hairbrush, say, could have been there for 18 years of her life, and she never even noticed it. And now she's picking up on these things, and she's understanding more things around her. She's making associations. She's meeting objects, and she's associating them with something, and it's connecting in her mind. Whether she can work with them or not, it takes a little bit while, but she's getting the idea right away. Maura did something I never thought she would do, and we came back to the hospital after we'd gone to see her one day, and she took me by the hand, and she took me into her room to see her room. Now, she has never ever done this before, and I didn't know at that time that she even knew it was a room until actually I was in there and she was showing me things. Now, for a blind, deaf, pretty well crippled girl, I thought that was just amazing. After she showed me her room, she walked me back out of it. Yes, I would say she's improved quite a bit. Well, behavior, one, she is super well behaved. Instead of socking you now, she just calmly lets you know she doesn't like it. Getting in and out of cars, she's excellent at that. She knows exactly what to do. Her walking isn't perfect, as we mentioned before, but she does try. She does manage to do it. And she seems to react to people much better than she did before. I think it's making her a lot happier. I know we're just thrilled about it.
Indeed, we feel now that we're exhilarated about the fact that she's done so well. That she has been done so perfectly well in such a short time. And like I said before, that it opens up a whole new vision for us, and of course we're guessing at where it will lead, but we feel that she has the capability of getting anything that's offered.
At the start of Maura's programming, she was not expected to have a high degree of success. However, Maura was successful for several reasons.
I think a lot of that has to do with the good health. And she's feeling much better than she has in 18 years, you know. She was, from the point when she was born, she was in a coma practically every night. Then she went to pneumonia all the time, colds, ear problems, nose, eyes, teeth.
Breathing mostly,
yes,
respiratory
so she's
ailments,
feeling much better. She's much healthier. And just feeling better yourself, you can associate with things around you much better. You feel better about them, you're more aware of them. I think a lot of that has to do with the health.
Probably because being active and new things being presented to her, that it has piqued her interest probably. And in that way, she's less frustrated, has more things to do, and the actual work of going to school and being in a program makes it a rounded life where she's tired when her day is over, and she's willing to be quiet and content, and she eats better, and she's more interested, frankly. I think it's a real good deal, a real good thing for her.
I think that one of the chief things in a hospital situation such as ours is boredom. And this idea of a pre-vocational workshop, whether it's in a regular workshop or on a residency, can work for many, many people who are not doing anything at all. Well, I think initially you have to not be negative and say, well, this person cannot achieve a certain thing, because you really don't know unless you try. And a lot of times you think that a person doesn't have the potential, and you find that they do. So I think that our attitude has to be a little more positive. I have learned a lot from this because I was negative, and I felt that it would be a very difficult thing to program Maura. I think the pre-vocation area has done a great deal in her favor, but it takes the cooperation of everyone, and it has been marvelous to have the backing of her parents, who will ask for suggestions, what they can do, and follow through. Their cooperation has been fantastic. The staff has been marvelous, and they try to help in any way that they possibly can. So it's not just one thing, it is a combination of everything. Because I think people get excited when they find out that someone has a lot more potential than they had anticipated, or when they see that there are such drastic changes in an individual.
First of all, there's been a great deal of involvement, not only of myself, but my coordinating teachers, my staff, the residents, the level of care staff, her group leader, her parents, her family. A lot of involvement, a lot of concern through different areas, and she's aware. She's aware. Maura is aware, and she feels those things, and I think that that has also brought out a little bit of wanting to do things out of her too.
This is Maura, now age 20. She has been a resident at Fairview State Hospital for 17 years. With the devotion, dedication, and determination of Maura's family and teachers, she has progressed beyond their expectations in a very short time. However, the future is still ahead.
Well, of course, we're very pleased with the progress that she's made in the recent past. And we're just elated with it. But at the same time, we've always, my wife and I have always felt that it's such a terrible shame that it couldn't have been started earlier, that providing her health was all right if it started 7 or 8 years ago. By this time, there's no telling what she could have done. And I think it's not only for Maura, but for any of the children in any of the clients in the hospital, to get started early, to give them the greatest chance that they can possibly get. And also in Maura's case, she's reaching the age of almost 21, and we're going to face the same bleak prospect that there will no longer be any more classes for her or any programs for her. And we hate to have seen her wait so long for this little bit and then do so well in this little bit and have it cut off so soon. I would certainly hope that in the near future there would be some openings for her to continue the work she's doing. And we would really like to see that. What do you think, June?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. We've all been remiss in not fighting for these programs sooner, or not having them available to us. In Maura's case, if it ends in another year, it's kind of like the movie Charlie, remember? He opened up the whole world and closed in.